I was 79 the morning it all cracked open, June 12, 2022. Humid for northern Ohio, the kind of sticky heat that makes your shirt cling to your back even before breakfast. I remember standing at my own kitchen counter, the laminate worn smooth from 40 years of coffee cups and Sunday crossword puzzles, staring at the little black recorder in my hand. About the size of a Zippo lighter. Cheap thing, $39.99 off Amazon. But that morning, it felt heavier than a gun. You know what it's like at this age when folks look at you like you've already drifted off somewhere, like you're fading behind your own eyes. Well, they've been doing that to me for months. Soft voices, slow explanations. Dad, you're confused. Dad, you don't remember. Dad, the doctor said, all that careful condescension. But I wasn't confused, and I damn sure remembered. I pressed the playback button on that recorder, and I swear to you, hearing my own son's voice, my son, Daniel, say the words he'd said in my living room the night before, it hit me like a sucker punch to the ribs. Just sign it, Dad. You're not thinking straight anymore. I'll handle everything. His voice wasn't gentle. It wasn't worried for me. It was impatient, like he was talking to a child who couldn't get his shoes on fast enough. And then my daughter-in-law, Megan, God help me, I used to think she had a good heart, came in with that sugar-sweet tone that barely covered the rot underneath. Your father's slipping, Dan. Someone has to take control before the bank steps in. The bank wasn't stepping in anywhere. My bills were paid. My memory was sharp enough to know when someone was lying to my face. But they didn't know about the recorder in my shirt pocket. They didn't know I'd been documenting every conversation since April, every pressured signature, every gaslighting comment, every time they tried to convince me I'd forgotten something I damn well hadn't forgotten. I stood there in the kitchen replaying that moment over and over. You're slipping, Dad. Slipping? Hell. I've been driving myself to the VA hospital in Cleveland for checkups, cooking my own meals, paying my own property taxes down at the county office. I wasn't perfect, but dementia, not even close. And yet they were building the case. I could see it all now, the puzzle pieces falling into place. The sudden lost paperwork, the missing mail, the doctor visit I never remembered making. The one they claimed happened in early May, where some physician supposedly said I had cognitive decline. Funny, because when I called the clinic, they said no such visit was ever recorded. So why were my own kids pretending otherwise? The worst part wasn't even the lies. It was hearing how easily they slipped into them, how natural it sounded, like they'd practiced. You ever feel your hands shake, not from age but from anger? That morning, holding that recorder, I had to set it down on the counter because my fingers wouldn't stop trembling. The injustice of it, the humiliation, the sheer betrayal. I wasn't losing my mind. They were trying to steal my life. At 9:13 that morning, Daniel knocked on the door again, hard, like he owned the place. I didn't move at first. I just stood there breathing slow, steady, feeling something in me shift. I'd spent my whole life trying to be a decent father, a patient father. But that knock, that was the sound of a man coming to finish something ugly. Dad, he called, we need to go over the paperwork before the notary arrives. Paperwork, notary, they were moving fast, too fast, because they thought I was weak. They thought I was confused. They thought I didn't have proof. I clicked the recorder off and slid it into my pocket. My Timex watch dug into my wrist as I reached for the door, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't planning to open it as someone's father. I was opening it as a man they'd pushed too far. When I pulled that door open, Daniel gave me this look, tight smile, calculating eyes, like he was already spending whatever he thought he was about to take from me. You ready, Dad? He asked. And I stared at him, right into those eyes I'd watched grow from a baby, and said something I hadn't planned, something that came from a place deeper than my anger. Son, you have no idea what I'm ready for. He blinked just once, caught off guard. Good. That was the first crack in his confidence, the first slip. But it wouldn't be the last. Because I had every word he'd said, every lie, every manipulation. Recorded. And I was done staying quiet. You know, before all this, before the whispering, the paperwork, the gaslighting, before they tried to take my whole life out from under me, Things weren't always so poisoned between me and Daniel. That's the part that messes with your head. Betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people you once held on your shoulders. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand who I was before they painted me as some doddering old fool. I wasn't drifting away. I wasn't confused. I was living my life, slow and creaky, sure, but still mine. I'd been in that old craftsman house in Lorraine since 1983. Bought it the year after I left the Ford plant in Brook Park, took the buyout when they started cutting shifts. Back then you could walk into a bank, shake a man's hand and get a mortgage that didn't need a committee to approve it. The house had good bones. Cedar trim, wide porch, a backyard big enough for the grandkids to run wild in. I rebuilt the deck myself after the storm in '06. My niece paid for it, but hell, I was proud of it. Most mornings before all this mess, I'd sit at the kitchen table, the one my wife, Linda, picked out from a flea market back in '91, and drink Folgers out of a chipped Cleveland Indians mug. I'd watch the birds hop along the fence line and let the day start slow. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing that suggested I was slipping. Then there was my routine at the VA hospital in Cleveland, every first and third Thursday. Blood pressure checks, cholesterol, chatting with old Army guys from my unit, Charlie Company, 3rd Battalion, back in Vietnam. We'd lost more than we could count, but the ones still kicking liked to sit around the waiting room telling the same stories and calling each other liars. Those men can smell dementia a mile off, and not once did anyone say, "Tom, you're losing it." Not once. And Sundays, well, Sundays were still for church, St. Luke's over on Grove Avenue. Same pew I'd sat in since '89, right side, 3 rows from the back. Folks there would come up, shake my hand, talk with me about the sermon. You don't do that with a man who's slipping. You don't treat him like a ghost. You talk to him straight. Then there was Daniel himself. You have to understand our history or what passed for one. He was my only son, the middle of 2 daughters and him. I never favored him, but maybe I expected more from him, being the only boy. He played baseball growing up, shortstop. Quick hands, strong arm. I used to take him down to Lakeview Park to practice grounders. He'd laugh when one took a bad hop and nailed him in the chest, then he'd fire it back at me twice as hard. We weren't perfect. No father and son are. But I never imagined he'd grow into the kind of man who'd look at me and see a bank account more than a father. He and Megan had been struggling the last few years. Money trouble, arguments, job changes. They moved back to Lorraine in 2021, renting a little place on West Erie. At the time, I was glad. I thought maybe we'd reconnect. I thought maybe having them close would bring Sunday dinners back, or at least a drop-in here and there. And for a while, that's exactly what happened. They visited, helped me fix a loose gutter, cleaned out the garage. Even brought me a birthday cake, yellow with chocolate frosting, my favorite. Looking back now, I wonder when the shift happened, when help turned into surveillance, when kindness turned into calculation. I do remember one conversation, might have been the first hairline crack, back in late February. I was sitting on the couch watching an old Browns game on the NFL Network. Daniel stopped by just to check in, he said. We were talking fine until he paused the TV and looked at me too long. "Dad, you ever forget where you put things? Happens a lot." I shrugged and told him, "Only the damn remote, and that's because your kids hide it in the couch cushions." He didn't laugh. He didn't even crack a smile. He just nodded like he was writing notes in his head. "Just making sure you're doing okay," he said. At the time, I thought nothing of it, but now I can hear the tone, the testing, the probing, the beginning of a story they wanted to tell about me. Then came April, the month everything started getting strange. My mail went missing, twice. A bank statement never showed. A Medicare letter was accidentally thrown away. And any time I asked questions, Megan would give me that pitiful look, the one people give dogs that can't climb the stairs anymore. "Oh, Tom, you're just overwhelmed," she'd whisper. "It happens." No, it happens when someone wants you to believe it. But back then, before I knew what was coming, I still trusted them. I still believed blood meant loyalty. I still thought, stupid as it sounds, that if something went wrong, my own son would protect me. One night around that time, early May maybe, I remember sitting with Daniel at my kitchen table. We were drinking cheap beer, Miller High Life, same stuff I drank when money was tight. He took a long sip and said, "Dad, you ever think about the future? Like, what happens if things get harder?" I shrugged. Things always get harder at this age. "Yeah, but I mean if you decline, mentally." He didn't blink when he said it, not even a twitch. And that was the first time a cold little seed of fear sprouted in my gut. But I still brushed it off, because I didn't want to believe my own flesh and blood would see vulnerability as an opportunity. I was wrong. Very wrong. And the worst part, that night when he asked me about decline, was also the same night I first thought about buying the recorder. I didn't know why, not yet. But something in me whispered, "Tom, protect yourself." I just didn't know how much protecting I'd need. I didn't realize how fast a family can turn on you until that spring. It doesn't happen all at once. It comes quiet, slow, like a draft under a door. You don't notice it until you're already cold. By early May, that draft had become a chill. Not enough to panic me yet, but enough to make the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I'd been around long enough, Vietnam, the plant strikes, losing Linda, to know when trouble was circling. But this trouble wasn't coming from strangers or enemies. It was coming from my own son. The first real crack happened on May 7th. I remember the date because it was the day before the Browns' rookie minicamp, and I'd been watching coverage on TV. I was sitting in my recliner, the one Linda bought in 2004 when my back started acting up. The sun was shining straight through the living room window, catching every bit of dust like floating little ghosts. I'd been dozing off when the door opened without a knock, just opened. "Dad," Daniel's voice, "too bright, too careful, you home?" I blinked awake. Where the hell else would I be? He smiled like I'd just proved his point. He walked in with a clipboard tucked under his arm. I didn't think anything of the clipboard at first. He always carried things, mail, bills, whatever. But this time he sat down across from me and didn't say anything for a long moment, just watched me. I didn't like that. "Something wrong?" I asked. No. He leaned forward in his chair, just checking on a few things. That phrase, that damn phrase, kept popping up all spring. Checking on a few things. Never explaining what, never saying why, just checking, like I was a car up on blocks needing inspection. He cleared his throat and lifted the top sheet from the clipboard. "Dad, the clinic said you missed your cognitive screening last month." That woke me right up. What screening? The one on April 12th. I never had a screening scheduled. I never even talked to anyone from that clinic in April. He nodded slowly, like this confirmed something. "You probably just forgot." I felt my jaw tighten. "Son, I didn't forget a damn thing. I wasn't there because nothing was scheduled." "Well," he said, eyes drifting over the page, "they have you marked as a no-show." "Then their records are wrong." He didn't argue. That was the thing, he never argued. He just wrote things down, quiet, methodical, like a detective building a file. That's when I felt it, that cold draft again. I sat forward, elbows on my knees. "What's really going on here, Daniel?" He hesitated. That tiny pause was the first confirmation that something wasn't right, not a hiccup, not a misunderstanding, something deliberate. He exhaled and said, "Dad, we're just trying to make sure you're safe. You've been slipping a little." "There it is again," I snapped. "Slipping. Where am I slipping, Daniel, in your imagination?" He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him answer. "Name one thing I've forgotten, one bill unpaid, one appointment missed, one damn instance that proves what you're hinting at." His eyes dropped to the clipboard again. "It's not about one thing, Dad. It's about patterns." Patterns? That word hit me harder than I let on. Patterns meant documentation. Patterns meant a case. Patterns meant they weren't just worried, they were preparing something. Something legal. Something permanent. I tried to calm myself. I leaned back, breath slow through my nose like Linda used to tell me when my temper flared. "Daniel," I said, "if you think I'm losing it, tell me to my face. Don't dance around it." He looked up, his voice softened, fake soft. "We're not accusing you of anything, we just want to help." Help? I'd heard that same tone from loan officers and county inspectors. It never meant help. He stood up, patted my shoulder, and walked toward the kitchen. "You want coffee? Megan made a whole pot this morning." "No," I said sharply. "I'll get my own." He froze mid-step, just for a moment, just long enough. That reaction, like me pouring my own coffee, was proof of instability. That was the second crack. Something was very, very wrong. The next big sign came 3 days later. May 10th. I'd driven myself to the post office. Yes, driven myself to check on a package of replacement batteries for my old Craftsman drill. I came home to find Megan sitting in my living room alone, purse on her lap, phone in her hand, legs crossed tight. "Oh," she said, startled. "Tom, I didn't expect you so soon." I looked around the room. Nothing obvious out of place. But being married to Linda for 41 years taught me something important. When someone has been somewhere they shouldn't, the air itself feels touched. "What are you doing here?" I asked. She smiled too wide, "Just tidying up a little." I never asked her to tidy anything. She stood, smoothing her shirt. "You look tired. Want me to fix you lunch?" "No," I said, watching her eyes. "I'm all right." Her expression shifted again, subtle but clear. Concern mixed with satisfaction. A strange blend, like she was happy to be concerned. "Daniel and I think you should let us handle your mail for a bit," she said. "Just until things settle." I stepped past her toward the kitchen table where today's mail sat. I picked it up. Light, too light. One envelope, generic, addressed to resident. Nothing else. "Megan," I said quietly, "where's the rest?" She blinked. "Rest of what?" "My mail. My bank statement should have come today. My VA letter too." She shrugged. "Maybe it didn't arrive yet." I held her gaze. "It always arrives by the 10th. Another pause, too long. Her jaw tightened a fraction. "I should go," she said, grabbing her purse. "We'll stop by later." She walked to the door quickly, too quickly, and that was the third crack. My mail wasn't lost. My mail was being intercepted. And I'll tell you something I didn't admit to anybody at the time, not even my buddy Earl from the VA lounge. I stood in that living room and felt something I hadn't felt since Vietnam, the instinct that someone was closing in on me. Not physically. Paperwork is more dangerous than bullets at my age. You can survive shrapnel. You can't survive losing control of your own life. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table until the sun dipped low. No TV, no radio, just the ticking of the Timex clock on the wall. I ran through every conversation from the last month, every odd remark, every invasive question, every missing envelope. And that's the moment I realized something chilling. They weren't waiting for me to decline. They were manufacturing the decline. Piece by piece. Paper by paper. Conversation by conversation. And I'll admit, I felt scared. Not of losing my mind, but of losing my rights. You take those away from an old man, and he may as well be dead already. That night I searched online, for the first time in my life, best discreet audio recorder for seniors. That's when I ordered the little black device that would change everything. I didn't buy it for revenge, not then. I bought it because something deep in my gut whispered, "They're setting you up, Tom. Protect yourself before it's too late." I didn't know the half of it yet. But I would. Soon. You ever have a moment in life when something clicks so hard it changes the sound of the world around you? Where the air feels different, heavier, like it's warning you to brace yourself. For me, that moment came on May 26, 2022, at exactly 3:42 in the afternoon. I know the time because I checked the clock on the microwave twice, once when I opened the envelope, and once when I realized my own children had crossed a line there was no coming back from. But let me back up a few hours. That morning started like any other. Folgers in my chipped Indians mug. Warm breeze through the kitchen window. The smell of cut grass from old Mrs. Patterson next door. My joints were stiff, but that was nothing new. Getting up at 79 is like starting an old tractor. Takes a minute, but it'll run if you know the right levers. I'd planned to sand the loose railing on the back porch, maybe run to Home Depot for new screws. Normal day, ordinary, quiet. Then Daniel called. Dad, Megan and I need to come by later, around 3. His voice was too tight, too rehearsed. It reminded me of how he used to sound when he came home late as a teenager and tried to act casual, like he hadn't been up to something. "What for?" I asked. "Just some paperwork we need to straighten out." "Paperwork, always paperwork." I told him fine and hung up, but there was a knot forming in my stomach, a slow, twisting dread. Still, I tried to shake it off. I went about my day, fixed the railing, even swept the porch. But when 3 o'clock rolled around, the sky clouded over. The house went a little darker. The breeze died. And then I heard the knock. 3 sharp raps, not the knock of someone visiting, the knock of someone arriving with business. I opened the door to find both of them, Daniel holding a manila folder, Megan with her purse clutched tight against her ribs. She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, Tom," she chirped, "busy day." Before I could answer, Daniel stepped inside like he was entering a property he already owned. "You got a minute, Dad? We need to go over a couple of things." I didn't like how he said need. I didn't like how he didn't wait for me to say yes. But I stepped aside. I'd always been raised to treat family with decency, even when they didn't deserve it. We sat at the kitchen table, me at the head, them on either side. The same arrangement we'd used at Thanksgiving when Linda was alive. Funny how betrayal always finds its way into the places that used to feel safe. Daniel opened the folder. Inside were forms. Lots of them. Legal-looking ones. I felt a prickling at the base of my skull. "What's all this?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Daniel slid the top paper toward me. "It's nothing major, Dad. Just some basic arrangements so we can help manage your finances. Things have been slipping." There it was again, slipping. I stared at the paper. At first the text blurred, not because of my eyes, but because I felt my heartbeat go heavy, slow, and angry. At the top, durable power of attorney. I looked up sharply. No, absolutely not. Megan leaned forward, voice soft like she was talking to a frightened child. "Tom, it's only to protect you. You've missed some payments, misplaced things," the clinic said. I slammed my hand down on the table harder than I meant to. The clinic said nothing because I never went to the damn clinic. Silence. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Dad, please, don't make this difficult." Difficult. That word hit me like a blow to the chest. Men like me, fathers, providers, workers, spend a lifetime trying not to be difficult. You show up, you pay your bills, you raise your kids, you fix the broken things in your house even when your back screams for mercy. And suddenly, at 79, the people you raised get to decide whether you're difficult. I felt the heat rising in my face. "I'm not signing anything." Daniel exchanged a quick glance with Megan. Then he sighed. A heavy, disappointed sigh, like I'd failed some test they had set for me in secret. "Dad," he said quietly, "you already agreed to this." My stomach dropped. Like hell I did. "Yes," he insisted, "at the clinic on May 4th. I wasn't at any clinic on May 4th. He didn't even flinch. He just reached into the folder and pulled out a paper. A form with my name on it, my date of birth, a place for my signature. And a shaky scribble that didn't look like my handwriting, at least not the kind I'd make willingly. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mouth went dry. "What is this?" I whispered. Daniel leaned back, cool as a surgeon. "It's your consent for evaluation." The doctor confirmed cognitive decline. I stared at the scribble again, and then something inside me cracked. It wasn't fear. It was the realization, sharp and cold, that they had forged my signature. Or worse, pressured me to sign something I didn't understand at the time. Megan reached out, put her hand over mine. "Tom, you can trust us. We're trying to take care of you." Her touch felt like ice. I pulled my hand back, slow, deliberate. And I saw it then, really saw it. The calculation in her eyes. The certainty in Daniel's. The plan they'd already put into motion. They weren't thinking about protecting me. They were thinking about control. About my house. My savings. My VA benefits. My pension. My life. Daniel cleared his throat. Dad, we're trying to avoid involving the court, but if you refuse. I cut him off, my voice low and shaking. You're threatening me. No, he said too quickly. We just want to avoid guardianship proceedings. Those can get messy. Guardianship. The word made my heart slam against my ribs. I'd seen old friends lose everything under guardianship. One court order and you're no longer a man, you're a ward, a dependent, a shell. I felt dizzy for a second, the room tilted. I gripped the table edge hard. Megan softened her voice again. Tom, we're only thinking of what's best. No, I said, you're thinking of what's best for you. And then, God help me, they both smiled. Not wide, not proud. Smiled the way people do when they think the game is already won. That's the moment, the exact second when I knew the truth. They didn't believe I had enough mind left to fight back. Daniel slid a pen toward me. Dad, sign it. My hand twitched. But instead of reaching for the pen, I reached into my shirt pocket. I felt the recorder there, warm from my body heat, small, inconspicuous, but powerful. My fingers closed around it. I knew right then I wasn't signing a damn thing. And I knew I had something stronger than lawyers or paperwork. Proof. Recordings of their lies. Recordings of their manipulation. Recordings of their pressure. The kind of evidence that could tear their little plan to shreds. But they didn't know that. And I wasn't about to tell them, not yet. I stood slowly, my knees cracked, my voice was steady. You two need to leave. Daniel laughed under his breath. Dad, don't be dramatic. Leave, I repeated. Megan rose first, straightening her blouse. We'll come back tomorrow, you'll feel differently. Daniel gathered the papers, tapping them into a neat stack. We're trying to help you, Dad. You're just too confused to see it. That sentence, that one. It scorched something in me. When they walked out and closed the door behind them, the house fell silent. A heavy, suffocating silence. I stood there breathing hard, angry, humiliated, heartbroken in a way I didn't know a man my age could still be. And then at 3:42 p.m., I finally pulled the recorder from my pocket. I hit play. And hearing their voices, their lies, their manipulation, their smug certainty, echoing back at me, that's when the shattering moment came. Because the truth hit me like a freight train. This wasn't about concern. This wasn't about my health. This was a takeover. A financial coup. A legal trap designed to steal my life while I was still breathing. And I knew right then. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to expose them. Piece by piece. Lie by lie. Recording by recording. And when I was done, they'd wish I really had dementia. After they walked out that day, the house didn't feel like my house anymore. It felt infiltrated, violated, like they'd tracked dirt into every corner of it. I sat there at the kitchen table long after the door clicked shut, staring at the recorder in my hand, replaying their voices until the battery warning light started blinking red. You know what hit me hardest? Not the threat of guardianship. Not the forged signature. Not even the way Daniel said I was confused. It was the realization that the moment they stepped outside, they didn't look nervous. They didn't look worried. They looked certain. Certain that the law, the system, and whatever doctor they'd lined up were already on their side. Certain that an old man like me didn't stand a chance. And for a moment, just a moment, I almost believed them. That night was the first of many long, sleepless ones. I wandered the house like a ghost, every step echoing too loudly on the hardwood floors Linda and I refinished together in '88. I found myself stopping in front of her picture over the mantel, a faded shot from our 40th anniversary dinner at Giovanni's in Cleveland. She had that smile, the one that softened even the worst days. Lynn, I whispered, touching the frame with shaking fingers. Did we raise him wrong, did I? The question hung in the air, heavier than my own breath. You think at 79 you felt every heartbreak a man can feel. But there's a special kind of pain reserved for being betrayed by the child you once taught to tie his shoes. I barely slept an hour that night. When morning came, I felt like I'd aged 10 years instead of 1. My back hurt more. My knees screamed. My hands shook worse than usual whenever I tried to button my shirt. And for the first time in my life, I hesitated before picking up my car keys. Not because I thought I couldn't drive, but because I wondered if someone else was waiting for me to fail. The next few days were a slow chokehold. On May 29th, I found a notice taped to my mailbox. We attempted delivery of important documents, but no slip of what they were, no signature required, no tracking number, just a bland little message like a taunt. On May 30th, I went to the bank to ask about my missing statement. The teller, young woman in her 20s with purple nails and a too bright smile, tilted her head sympathetically. "Mr. Callahan, your son already picked up the last 2 statements. He's listed as authorized." "Authorized?" I felt my pulse pound in my temples. "He is not authorized," I said through clenched teeth. She hesitated. "It shows here, power of attorney on file." I leaned forward, "And when was that filed?" She scrolled slowly, too slowly, my heart hammered. "May 3rd, she said. The same week they'd claimed I'd been at a clinic I'd never visited. I gripped the counter to steady myself. "I never signed that form." She gave me a soft, patronizing smile I'd come to hate. "Sometimes memory issues can." "Stop," my voice cracked like a whip. "I know what I signed and what I didn't." People turned to look. I didn't care. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of lies I didn't create. Walking out of that bank was one of the loneliest moments of my life. The parking lot stretched out in front of me like an empty field. Not one person on my side. Not one person who believed I was still the man I've always been. I climbed into my old Ford, closed the door, and sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles bleached white. For the first time since this all began, a sickening question slithered into my mind. What if they win? What if a judge listens to them? What if the forged paperwork holds? What if they take over my bank accounts, my house, my benefits, my entire damn life? I imagined being moved into some facility, handing over my keys, my wallet, my independence, some stranger telling me when to eat, when to sleep, Daniel signing papers over me like a landlord managing a property. And the worst part, no one questioning it. Because everyone loves a simple story. Old man loses his mind. Family steps in. Case closed. I sat there until the engine cooled, until the sun slipped lower, until I felt smaller than I'd ever felt as a man. That was the descent. Slow, invisible. A steady unraveling of everything that made me me. On June 1st, things got even darker. I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman introduced herself as Deborah Kent from Lorain County Adult Protective Services. My throat closed. "Mr. Callahan," she said, "we've received a report expressing concerns about your cognitive capacity and your ability to manage your affairs safely." I felt the phone grow hot against my ear. "From who?" "I'm not at liberty to say, but we're required to follow up." Of course, they weren't allowed to say. But I knew. God, did I know. "Mr. Callahan, we'd like to schedule a home visit," she continued, "just to make sure you're safe and your needs are being met." Safe. Needs being met. They talk to you like you're a dog living alone in a shed. I swallowed hard. Do I have a choice? "Of course," she said brightly. "You can refuse, but then we'll note non-cooperation and the case may proceed differently." Differently. I knew what that meant, even if she didn't say it. Court guardianship, loss of rights, final nail in the coffin. When I hung up, the walls felt closer than they had the night before. My lungs felt too tight. I sat on the couch, hands pressed to my face, feeling the weight of everything closing in. That night I broke. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the carpet until my vision blurred. My chest hurt, Not sharp like a heart attack, but deep, old, hollow. The pain of seeing your own son use the very systems meant to protect the vulnerable to destroy you. I said something out loud then, in the dark, voice cracking. Linda, I need help. Not a prayer, not really. Just a plea. A man's final rope stretching thin before the fall. But here's the funny thing about hitting bottom. Sometimes it's exactly what a man needs. Because once you fall far enough, you stop worrying about the drop. And you start looking for something, anything to climb. It wasn't strength that pulled me out, or courage, or some heroic burst of old man fire. It was something smaller. The next morning, June 2nd, I opened the drawer where I kept the recorder. I held it in my hand, felt its weight. And a spark lit inside me. Tiny, fragile, but real. They thought I was weak. They thought I was confused. They thought I was fading. But everything they'd said and done was on that little device. Every lie, every manipulation, every slip-up. And if there's one thing you learn in 79 years on this earth, it's this. People get bold when they think no one's watching. But I'd been watching, listening, recording. I realized something else that morning too. I couldn't win this alone. If I was going to fight back, really fight back, I needed someone who believed me, someone who knew the system better than Daniel, someone who couldn't be bullied, tricked, or sweet-talked, someone who still saw me as a person, not a case file on its way to guardianship court. I didn't know who that person was yet, but I knew one thing. The descent was over. It was time to rise. Slowly, carefully, strategically. And the first step, finding an ally, one who would change everything. You ever notice how, when you're younger, help comes loud? Friends show up at your door, family rushes in, people ask what you need. But at 79, help, real help, comes quiet. It doesn't knock. It slips in through the cracks when you least expect it. My ally didn't arrive like some savior. No dramatic entrance. No heroic declarations. She came into my life the same way she always did, pushing a mop bucket down the hall at the VA clinic. Her name was Rosa Alvarez. I'd known Rosa for years. Not well, but enough to say hello, talk about the Cleveland weather, complain about the Browns, maybe exchange a joke. She worked nights mostly, but sometimes I'd see her in the afternoons when I came in for checkups. What I didn't know was that Rosa had been watching me far more carefully than I ever realized. And that she'd noticed what my own children pretended was invisible. June 3rd, 2022. The day after everything nearly collapsed on me. I dragged myself to the VA for my routine checkup, not because I felt particularly healthy, but because I needed to be around people who knew I wasn't losing my mind. The waiting room was cold as usual, air conditioning blasting enough to freeze a man's ankles. Guys in baseball caps and faded Vietnam jackets were scattered around, trading the same old stories. I didn't speak much. I just sat there gripping the recorder in my coat pocket like a talisman. When the nurse finally called my name, I stood too fast and the room tilted. Lack of sleep, too much stress, a 79-year-old body trying to carry the weight of betrayal. Rosa was mopping near the doorway when she saw me sway. Her mop clattered to the floor. "Mr. Callahan," she said, hurrying toward me, "you okay?" I forced a breath, just tired. But Rosa wasn't convinced. She guided me gently to a chair. Her hand was warm, firm, kind, something I hadn't felt from family in months. "You don't look just tired," she said, studying my face. "What happened?" I let out a shaky chuckle. "Long story." "Well," she said, folding her arms, "I can mop slow today." There was something in her expression, concern without pity, strength without condescension, and something in me cracked open a little. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to carry this alone. So I told her. Not everything, not at first, just the edges. "My son thinks I'm losing it," I muttered. "He and his wife, they've been saying things, doing things, making it look like I'm slipping." Rosa didn't blink. "Are you?" No, I snapped, I'm not. Thought so, she said calmly. You don't talk like a man who's slipping. That hit me harder than I expected. The simple dignity of being believed, it damn near broke me. I swallowed hard. They filed power of attorney behind my back. Rosa sucked in a breath. Ay Dios, those things can be dangerous. I nodded, and they forged my signature or pressured me to sign something I didn't understand. She placed a hand on my arm. Mr. Callahan, that is abuse. That is real abuse. Hearing the word out loud felt like being punched in the ribs. Abuse. I'd always pictured abuse as bruises or shouting or cruel hands, not paperwork, not legal tricks, not your own children smiling while they stab you in the back. I recorded them, I whispered, almost afraid to admit it. Her eyes widened. Good, very good. You think it means anything? It means everything. She reached into her cart and pulled out a small notebook, spiral-bound, worn, the kind nurses use to track shift schedules or patient notes. You need evidence, she said. All the dates, all the times, every missing letter, every conversation, write it down. I hesitated. Will it help? She said firmly. The courts, adult protective services, the banks, they care about documentation, not feelings. I nodded slowly. She was right. Feelings wouldn't save me. Evidence would. Rosa wasn't done. And you need a lawyer, a good one, not some TV commercial guy. I laughed bitterly. I can't afford thousands of dollars in legal fees. She shook her head. Not all lawyers cost that kind of money. There's Legal Aid of Cleveland. They help seniors, especially with elder exploitation. The words made my heart stutter. Legal aid, a real lawyer, someone who could challenge the forged forms, someone who could stand up to Daniel's lies, someone who might actually take me seriously. Rosa wrote a name on a page and tore it out. Call Margaret Chin. She helped my aunt when her nephew stole from her. Tough lady, sharp, no nonsense. I took the paper with trembling hands. She wasn't finished. You show her those recordings, Mr. Callahan. You tell her everything. I looked at Rosa, this woman I'd never really known, and felt something profound. This is what help looks like at 79. Not dramatic, not heroic. Just someone quietly stepping into the darkness with you. Thank you, I said, my voice rough. She gave me a small, sad smile. You remind me of my father. He trusted the wrong people once. Don't make the same mistake. That afternoon, I drove home with the legal aid number burning a hole in my shirt pocket. My hands were still shaking, but for the first time in weeks, they shook with purpose instead of fear. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Daniel had slid the forged papers across to me, and stared at the phone. I must have dialed the number 3 times before I finally pressed the last digit. My heart thundered in my chest as the line rang. 1 ring. 2. 3. Then a voice answered, calm, crisp, professional. Legal Aid of Cleveland, this is Margaret. I swallowed hard. Ms. Chen, I said, trying to steady myself. My name is Tom Callahan. I think my family is trying to take control of my life. A pause, a shift in tone. Something like recognition. Mr. Callahan, tell me what's going on. And I did. Everything. The missing mail. The clinic lies. The forged papers. The threats of guardianship. The fear. The recordings. I expected disbelief, at best polite skepticism. What I got instead was a slow, cold anger that didn't belong to me. Mr. Callahan, she said after a long moment, you need to come into my office, immediately, and bring the recorder. My breath caught. Will you help me? Oh, she said, the steel in her voice unmistakable. I won't just help you. A beat. I'm going to burn their case to the ground. A tear rolled down my cheek, not from sadness this time. From relief. Real relief. The kind that fills your lungs again after weeks of drowning. For the first time since Daniel slid that pen across the table. I had an ally. A real one. And together, we were about to turn the tide. When you're my age, people expect you to shrink, to get quiet, compliant, easy to manage. They don't expect you to plan. They don't expect you to prepare. And they sure as hell don't expect you to fight. That was Daniel's biggest mistake. He thought I'd fold. But with Rose's note in my pocket and Margaret Chen waiting for me downtown, I wasn't folding. I was sharpening. I drove to her office on June 4th, 2022, a Saturday morning so muggy the air felt like soup. Downtown Cleveland isn't pretty, never has been. But that day the city looked different. Like the buildings themselves stood taller, like they knew I was coming in for a fight. Legal Aid's office was in a squat brick building near East 6th. The waiting room was small, clean, a little too bright. A young woman behind the counter smiled when I walked in. "Appointment?" she asked. "Yes," I said, gripping the recorder in my jacket. "Callahan, Tom." Her expression changed, subtle but noticeable. She nodded quickly. "Ms. Chen is expecting you, second door on the right." I walked down the hall, each step echoing off tile. Felt like I was marching toward something final, something that would either save me or finish me. Margaret's door was open. She was standing at her desk, late 30s maybe, hair pulled into a knot, glasses perched halfway down her nose. She didn't smile, didn't offer small talk, just gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit," she said, "we've got a lot to cover." Her voice reminded me of drill sergeants I knew back in '62, firm, sharp, no nonsense. Good. I needed someone who didn't flinch. I sat down slowly. My knees popped like bubble wrap, but I hid the wince. "You brought the recorder?" she asked immediately. I pulled it from my jacket pocket and placed it on the desk. She picked it up like it was evidence from a crime scene. "You understand," she said. "If this contains what you say it does, your son and daughter-in-law are in very serious legal danger." My throat went dry. "I'm not trying to put them in jail. I just want my life back." She nodded. "We'll get you that. But let me be clear. What they've done is elder financial exploitation, fraud, and potentially felony forgery." Hearing it laid out like that felt like a punch and a lifeline all at once. She clicked the recorder on and listened. Not all of it, just enough. Enough to hear Daniel say, "You're slipping, Dad, sign it." Enough to hear Megan whisper, "The bank will step in if we don't." Enough to hear them push, pressure, manipulate. She clicked it off and sat back, eyes blazing with controlled fury. "They've built a false narrative," she said. "A coordinated one. That's sophisticated abuse, not confusion." I felt my hands tremble. "So what do I do?" She steepled her fingers. "You follow my lead. No improvising, no confronting them. You let them think they still have control." "Play weak," I asked bitterly. "Play smart," she corrected. "And while they think you're fading, we're going to build a wall so high they'll break their necks trying to climb it." I took a long, unsteady breath. "What's the plan?" She opened a yellow legal pad filled with notes. More notes than I expected for a man she'd only just met. "First," she said, "we gather every piece of evidence you have. Dates, missing mail, calls, clinic lies, bank statements, everything." I nodded. "I've been keeping track since Rosa told me to." "Good. Second, we subpoena your clinic records to prove you were never evaluated. Third, we file a petition to invalidate the fraudulent power of attorney." She paused, leaning forward. "And fourth, we wait." "Wait for what?" I asked. "For them to make their next move," she said. "Because people like your son, they don't stop, they escalate. And when they do, they'll hand us exactly what we need." A cold shiver ran through me. She was right. Daniel wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The next 2 weeks were some of the hardest of my life. Not because I felt beaten, no, but because I had to pretend to be. Margaret's first instruction was clear. "Let them come to you, don't refuse visits, don't argue, don't challenge, keep the recorder running." So I did. I kept the little device in my flannel shirt pocket every waking moment. And Daniel, he came by almost daily. Sometimes alone. Sometimes with Megan. Always with that same cool, controlled tone. "Dad, we should talk about the bills again." Dad, you mixed up some dates. Dad, we're worried you're declining faster than we thought. Every sentence was a trap. Every question a setup. I'd look confused on purpose now. Ask them to repeat things. Let silence hang. Not weakness. Strategy. But I'll tell you the truth, it wasn't an easy act. Not because I couldn't pretend, but because pretending felt like looking through a window at my own funeral, like watching them bury me while I stood there alive, screaming behind glass. And they believed it. Hell, they thrived on it. One afternoon, Daniel walked through my house like he owned it, opened drawers, checked mail, examined my pill bottles. You should label these better, Dad, he said. It's confusing. I wanted to tell him the only confusing thing was how I'd raised a son who could be this cold. But I didn't. I just nodded and let him think he was winning. Because Margaret was right. Every arrogant word. Every manipulative gesture. Every illegal step. I was capturing all of it. Building a case brick by brick. And they didn't have the faintest idea the walls were closing in. But the moment I knew we had them, the moment I realized Daniel was going to give us exactly what we needed, came on the evening of June 17th. He and Megan showed up unannounced, as usual. They stood in my living room, arms folded, looking like executives waiting for a deal to close. Daniel cleared his throat. Dad, your APS worker is coming Monday. We told her you've been declining quickly. My heart thudded, but I kept my face slack, my voice soft. I don't remember agreeing to that. Megan stepped closer. It's okay, Tom. We're here to help you through it. Then Daniel said it, the line that made the hair on my arm stand up. We need guardianship paperwork in place before anything gets complicated. The court moves slow. If you sign now, we can avoid a messy hearing. There it was. The noose tightening. Guardianship. Full control. Full access. Full takeover. And the best part, the recorder caught every word. Daniel wasn't threatening anymore. He wasn't implying. He wasn't suggesting. He was stating clearly, directly, that they were moving to declare me legally incompetent. And in that moment, for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt no fear. Because they had just handed me the bullet. All Margaret needed now was the gun. When they left that night, the house felt lighter than it had in months. I sat at the table in the quiet, listening to the recording play back. Their voices, smug and certain, filled the kitchen like ghosts of their own downfall. Then I dialed Margaret's number. She picked up on the first ring, talked to me. I told her what happened, word for word. She went silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice cold enough to freeze steel, she said, Mr. Callahan, congratulations. You just caught them attempting preemptive guardianship fraud. That's the nail in their coffin. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. What do we do now? I asked. Margaret inhaled sharply, the sound of someone loading ammunition. Now, she said, we execute. Her voice sharpened. APS visit Monday. You play calm, coherent, confused by their claims. I'll handle the rest. By the time your son realizes what's happening. She paused. You'll already have the court on your side. I leaned back in my chair, letting her words settle. And for the first time in months, I felt powerful. Not young. Not strong. Not healed. But powerful. Because the trap they laid for me, it was about to snap shut. Around them. If Part 7 was the setup, then what happened next, starting Monday, June 20th, was the beginning of the end. Not for me, for them. Everything Margaret promised, everything Rosa warned me about, everything I feared they'd push for, it all collided in one single week. And I'll tell you right now, revenge doesn't come like fire and fury at my age. It comes cold. Procedural, paperwork and timing, precision. And when the hammer drops, it drops with no warning at all. The APS visit was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. I was up at 6. I shaved. I showered. I put on my cleanest flannel and my good jeans, the ones without the frayed cuffs. I even made myself breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee. Not to impress anyone. To look like exactly what I was. A man who could damn well take care of himself. At 9:45, Daniel and Megan arrived, uninvited, of course. They walked in like federal agents raiding a stash house. Daniel looked around the living room, probably checking for safety hazards he could point out. Megan straightened a throw pillow like she was staging a crime scene. "You okay, Dad?" she asked in that syrupy voice that made my stomach turn. "I'm fine," I said. Daniel gave me a tense little smile. "Try not to argue with the APS worker today. Just be honest. It'll go smoother." Smoother? That word again. Like this was some sort of well-oiled plan. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The recorder, and yes, it was running, caught everything. At 10:04, a soft knock came at the door. Deborah Kent, APS. Late 50s, gray bob, sharp eyes. The kind of woman who has seen every kind of family mess you can imagine and no longer bothers pretending to be shocked by any of it. She stepped inside, smiled politely, then turned to me. "Mr. Callahan, I'm Deborah. Thank you for letting me visit." I nodded. "Of course. Can I get you some coffee?" Daniel's head jerked toward me, surprised, maybe even annoyed that I sounded perfectly normal. "No, thank you," Deborah said. "Let's just chat a bit." We sat at the kitchen table. Same place Daniel once slid forged papers across, thinking he'd already won. Felt poetic looking back. Deborah started with basic questions. "How have you been managing your medications?" "Fine," I said. "I sort them myself every Sunday." "And your meals, shopping?" "I drive to Giant Eagle twice a week, keep my pantry stocked." "How about your bills?" "I pay them online or in person. Last time I missed one was 2018, when my internet was down for 3 days." I saw Daniel shift uncomfortably. Megan crossed her legs and forced a smile. Deborah looked at me carefully. "Your son and daughter-in-law have expressed concerns about your memory." I leaned forward. "What concerns?" She opened her notebook. "They said you've been confused, misplaced mail, forgotten appointments. They also said your clinic evaluated you for cognitive decline." Now here was the moment Margaret had trained me for. Do not react emotionally. Do not accuse. Do not explode. Just gently, calmly, truthfully knock the legs out from under their entire narrative. So I said politely, "I never missed a clinic visit because I never scheduled one, and I never had any cognitive evaluation." Deborah blinked. "Never." "No," I said, "you can check their records." Then she turned to Daniel. "Is that correct?" His face tightened. "Dad probably doesn't remember." "Ma'am," I said, cutting him off but keeping my voice steady, "would you like my clinic to confirm it while you're here?" A small flicker crossed her face. Interest? Doubt? Curiosity? She nodded. "That would be helpful." I dialed the clinic speakerphone style at the table. When the receptionist answered, I said, "This is Tom Callahan. Have I had any cognitive evaluation in the last 6 months?" A brief pause, then, "No, sir, nothing of that kind." Daniel's eyes darted to Megan's. Megan looked like someone had yanked the rug out from under her. Deborah scribbled something in her notebook. "Score 1. She moved on. "Mr. Callahan, do you feel your son and daughter-in-law have been helping you manage your finances?" I looked at her calmly. I didn't ask for help, and I didn't authorize them to collect any bank statements. Daniel jumped in. "We were just trying to help." "And did he ask you to?" Deborah asked. Daniel hesitated. "Well, no, but..." I leaned forward. "Would you like a copy of my bank's authorization form, showing I never added him to my accounts?" Deborah nodded. "Yes, please." I slid a printed copy across the table. Margaret had prepared it for me. Clean, clear, official. Daniel's face started to redden. "Score 2. Then Deborah asked the question that cracked open the whole thing. Mr. Callahan, is there any reason to believe your rights are being threatened, or that someone is trying to take control of your property or decisions without your consent? Silence. Daniel stared at me. Megan stiffened, and I said gently, I don't want to accuse anyone, but I would like you to listen to something. I placed the recorder on the table and pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the kitchen. We need guardianship paperwork in place before things get complicated. Deborah's pen stopped mid-stroke. Another clip. Dad, you're slipping, just sign it. Then Megan. If he doesn't sign now, the court will step in. Deborah slowly set her pen down. And if you want to know what defeat looks like, it looks like the moment your son finally realizes the old man he thought he was manipulating was documenting everything. Daniel's mouth hung open. Megan went pale. Deborah closed her notebook. I think I've heard enough. She stood, shook my hand, and said in a steady voice, Mr. Callahan, you appear fully competent. I see no basis for guardianship proceedings. I will be closing the case. Megan gasped. Wait, what? You're not even going to. But Deborah turned to her, and her voice hardened. Ma'am, what I've heard today is elder coercion, and possibly fraud. Daniel stepped forward. This is a misunderstanding. No, she said sharply, it is. Then she turned back to me. Mr. Callahan, expect a call from legal aid. I'll be referring this case directly to them as a potential exploitation matter. My heart swelled, not with joy, not with triumph. With relief. Pure, trembling relief. Daniel stared at me with something new now. Not pity, not manipulation, not smugness. Fear. Deborah walked to the door, paused, and said, Take care, Mr. Callahan, and keep documenting everything. The door closed behind her. Silence. Daniel finally spoke, voice low and shaking with anger. Dad, what did you just do? I looked at him, really looked at him. And I said, with every ounce of calm steel I could muster, I protected myself. Half an hour later, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet. The air felt clean. For the first time in months, I could breathe. My phone buzzed. Margaret. I answered, and before I could speak, she said, Mr. Callahan, APS just sent me their report. It's damning. It's over for your son. I closed my eyes. A tear slid down my cheek. Not from victory. From the weight of what it cost to get here. But this wasn't the end. Not yet. What came next would tear their entire plan apart for good. There's a strange silence that follows a battle you've survived. Not victory, not peace, just stillness. Heavy, cautious, like the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what comes next. For me, that silence settled over the house after APS shut down the guardianship attempt. Daniel and Megan left in a hurry, the way people leave a crime scene when they hear sirens in the distance. They didn't slam the door. They didn't shout. They just slipped out, pale and shaken, like two kids caught breaking into the wrong garage. But trouble never leaves quietly. It lingers. It festers. And in the days that followed, I felt the weight of what was coming, something bigger, something legal, something that would drag the entire mess out into daylight. Margaret called it the unwinding. She said once exploitation starts to crumble, it doesn't fall clean. It tears like old wallpaper. Every layer brings up another, and you see things you didn't even know were there. She was right. On June 21st, the morning after the APS visit, I sat at the kitchen table nursing a cup of black coffee when the phone rang. The caller ID flashed. Legal AID of Cleveland. My heart thudded. I answered. Mr. Callahan, Margaret said, the APS worker filed her report. It's serious. She concluded you are competent, at no risk, and this is important, that your son and daughter-in-law attempted to misrepresent your condition for personal financial control. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That means, she continued, we move forward today. Forward how? I asked. We're filing an emergency petition to invalidate the fraudulent power of attorney. Once that's done, your son loses all access to your accounts, property, and decision-making authority. I rubbed my face. My hand shook, not with fear this time, with something like release. She continued, "We're also notifying the bank, and the clinic, and APS. The pieces will fall quickly now. Just stay put and don't contact your son." I swallowed hard. "What happens to him?" "That depends on what they find," she said, voice low. "But fraud leaves fingerprints, especially when the perpetrators get sloppy." Sloppy. That word stuck with me. Daniel thought he'd planned everything perfectly. He didn't plan for Margaret. The unraveling began at noon that day. My phone buzzed with a call from KeyBank's fraud department. A man named Jeffrey Price introduced himself in a calm, measured voice. "Mr. Callahan, we've received information from legal aid and APS that there may be unauthorized access to your accounts." I felt heat rise in my face. "Yes, my son, he took my statements without permission." "We know," he said gently. "We're looking into the authorization form he filed on May 3rd. My breath hitched. "Is it fake?" "That's what we're determining. But I can tell you this. The signature on that document does not match the one we have on file for your mortgage, car loan, or original account agreement." My throat tightened. "It does." "No, sir. And until we conclude our internal review, we're freezing any third-party access." Something inside me unclenched. "What happens if you confirm forgery?" I asked. He paused. "Then this becomes a criminal matter." I closed my eyes. Daniel had crossed a line I could never unsee. The next blow came 2 days later. June 23rd. A thick envelope arrived in the mail, legal aid stationery. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a copy of the emergency petition Margaret had filed. And when I say it laid everything bare, I mean everything. All the missing mail. All the fabricated clinic visits. All the coerced conversations. All the recordings, transcribed line by awful line. Seeing my own son's manipulative words typed out in black and white. That hurt in a way I didn't know paper could hurt. I leaned against the counter, legs trembling, and whispered, "Jesus, Daniel, what did you become?" There was no answer. Only the sound of the refrigerator humming. Later that afternoon, Margaret called again. "They filed their response," she said softly. My pulse quickened. "What did they say?" "It's interesting." I sat down hard. "Interesting how?" "They're claiming you misunderstood everything," she said. "That they were acting out of love. That you fabricated the cognitive concern. They even said the recordings misrepresent their intentions." A cold laugh escaped my chest. "Do they think the court's stupid?" "They think you're stupid," she corrected. "Or at least they thought that before APS saw through everything." I let that sink in. The arrogance, the certainty, the entitlement. Margaret continued. "Guardian petitions almost never collapse this early. But with the APS ruling, the clinic confirmation, and the bank red flags, their story has holes you could drive a truck through." My eyes burned. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, "we prepare for the hearing." Hearing? My stomach tightened. "Yes, a formal session before the probate judge. You'll testify. APS will testify. I'll present evidence. And your son will have to answer for what he did." I rubbed my forehead. "Do I have to see him?" "Yes," she said gently, "but you won't be alone, and he won't be in control." I sat there breathing slow, steady breaths, as the weight of it settled over me. Daniel. In court. Facing what he did. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or sick. Maybe both. That night I walked out to the back porch. The sky was pink and lavender, the kind of Ohio sunset that makes the whole world look bruised. I sat in my rocking chair, the one Linda bought me on my 70th birthday, and let the evening breeze wash over me. And for the first time, the quiet didn't feel suffocating. It felt earned. But grief has sharp edges, and as I rocked slowly, something twisted inside me. This wasn't the revenge part, not yet. This was the reckoning. I kept seeing Daniel as a boy, 5 years old, running through the sprinkler in our front yard, laughing so hard he couldn't breathe. I kept hearing his voice the day he graduated high school. "I'll make you proud, Dad." And now a judge was about to hear evidence that he tried to steal my home, my money, my autonomy, my life. How does a man digest that? I wiped my eyes. I'm not ashamed to admit the tears came. They came quietly, burning, relentless, not hot with anger, cold with mourning, mourning a son who still breathed but was gone all the same. As the last of the daylight slipped away, I whispered into the dark, "Linda, I don't know how we ended up here." The wind rustled the maple leaves overhead, but no answer came. Just a lonely kind of quiet. A quiet that said, "This is what justice costs, Tom. Even when you win, you lose something." The hearing was still ahead. The confrontation. The exposure. The final unraveling of everything Daniel had tried to build. And I knew deep down that once the truth came out in that courtroom, nothing between us would ever be the same again. But the time for tenderness had passed. The time for consequences was coming. And when it arrived, it would hit harder than he ever imagined. I used to think endings were clean, like the last page of a book or the final whistle in a Browns game. But real endings, the ones that matter, are messy. They drag pieces of you with them. They don't wrap things up with a bow. They leave threads hanging, questions echoing, things unsaid. The probate hearing for my case was held on July 14, 2022, in a small courtroom on the 3rd floor of the Lorain County Courthouse. The hallway outside smelled like old paper and floor wax, the same way it did back in the 90s when Linda and I came to file a zoning appeal for our fence. Funny how certain places hold memories whether you want them to or not. Margaret met me there. She wore a charcoal suit and carried a binder thicker than a Bible. She gave me a small nod, professional calm, but with a flicker of something protective behind her eyes. "You ready, Mr. Callahan?" she asked. I was not really. How could I be? But I nodded anyway. Inside the courtroom, Daniel was already seated at the respondent's table, Megan beside him. They looked smaller than I remembered, tight shoulders, shallow breaths, eyes darting around like they were waiting for someone to tell them what to do next. For a moment I saw my son the way he looked when he was 10 years old and screwed up the lawnmower beyond repair, scared, ashamed, hoping I'd fix it for him. But this wasn't a broken lawnmower. This was a broken trust, and I couldn't fix it. Not this time. When the judge entered, everyone stood. He was mid-60s, silver hair, glasses halfway down his nose. His nameplate read Judge Harrison F. Klein. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He simply opened the file in front of him, adjusted his glasses, and said, "Let's begin." Margaret spoke first. She presented everything with surgical precision: dates, documents, bank records, APS findings. She played clips from the recordings. Not the worst ones, not the ones where Daniel's voice shook with frustration or Megan whispered poison into his ear, but the clearest ones. The ones where the intent was unmistakable. Guardianship. Control. Power of attorney. Decline that didn't exist. The courtroom wasn't dramatic like you see in movies. No gasps, no shouting, just quiet, heavy, real. The kind of silence that tells you truth hurts more than any outburst ever could. When she finished, the judge nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Chen." Then he turned to Daniel. "Mr. Callahan," he said, addressing my son, not me, "you may respond." Daniel stood slowly. His face was gray, his hands trembling in a way I'd never seen before. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then tried to speak. We were just trying to help my dad," he stammered. "We thought he was forgetting things, we thought." Judge Klein held up a hand. "Mr. Callahan, please don't insult this court. The APS investigation was thorough, the clinic records are clear, and the recordings," he paused, weighing his words, "the recordings speak for themselves." Megan leaned toward Daniel, whispering fiercely. He shook her off. Daniel swallowed hard. "Dad," he said, turning to me, "why didn't you just talk to me? We could have fixed this at home." I stared at him. And in that moment, I saw him for exactly who he had become. Not the little boy who used to fall asleep in my recliner. Not the teenager who wanted to join the Marines. Not the young father who cried when his first daughter was born. No. I saw a man who believed his father's age made him expendable. A man who saw opportunity where he should have seen responsibility. A man who hadn't just crossed a line, he'd erased it. "Son," I said quietly, "I tried. You didn't want a conversation, you wanted control." His mouth tightened, tears welled in his eyes but didn't fall. "You don't understand," he whispered. "We needed the money. Megan lost her job. We were drowning, I thought." "You thought," I said, "that taking from me would fix your life." He flinched like I'd struck him. And God help me, a part of me still loved him in that moment, still wanted to reach out, still wanted to believe he wasn't lost. But love has limits, even a father's love. Judge Klein cleared his throat. "I've heard enough." He shuffled papers, adjusted his glasses, and began reading the ruling. "This court finds that Thomas Callahan is fully competent, capable of managing his affairs independently, and has been the victim of attempted financial exploitation by his son, Daniel Callahan, and daughter-in-law, Megan Callahan." The words hung in the air like a final bell. "The power of attorney filed on May 3rd is invalidated. All access to Mr. Callahan's accounts is revoked. A restraining order preventing undue influence or financial involvement by the respondents is granted for a period of 12 months. Daniel bowed his head. Megan's hand tightened on his arm. But the judge wasn't finished. "This court strongly recommends that the matter be reviewed by the county prosecutor for potential criminal charges." I inhaled sharply. Criminal charges? Against my son? My blood? Judge Klein closed the file with a soft thud. "Mr. Callahan," he looked directly at me, "you did the right thing. This is a growing problem in our county. I'm glad you spoke up." I nodded, but my throat was too tight to thank him. "Court adjourned," he said. And just like that, it was over. Outside the courthouse, Margaret walked with me to my car. My knees ached, my hands shook, not from fear this time, from the weight of everything landing at once. "You did well," she said softly, "better than most." "Did I?" I asked, "because it doesn't feel like victory." She was quiet for a long moment. "Justice doesn't always feel like winning," she said. "Sometimes it just feels like the truth coming out." I nodded. Truth. It had come out. But it had cost something I could never get back. She squeezed my arm gently. "If you need anything, call me." I thanked her. She walked away. I got into my Ford, closed the door, and sat in the silence. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid, but I wasn't relieved either. Just older. Tired. Human. It wasn't until I pulled into my driveway that the emotion finally hit. The house looked the same porch light, same sagging gutter, same old maple tree casting shadows across the lawn. But it felt different. Safe again, yes. But lonelier too. I sat on the porch steps as the sun dipped low, the sky turning orange and pink, and I whispered into the breeze, "Linda, I hope I did right." A single tear rolled down my cheek, not many, not a torrent, just one. Because that's all that was left. I didn't lose my home. I didn't lose my rights. I didn't lose myself. But I lost my son. And there's no court order, no lawyer, no judge, no ruling that can fix that. That's the part of the story people don't talk about. Justice isn't clean. Revenge isn't sweet. Winning doesn't heal you. It just keeps you alive long enough to keep going. And maybe that's enough. I stood up slowly, opened the screen door, and stepped inside. Just me. My house. My life. Still mine. Still standing. And for now, that's the ending I have. That's the ending I earned.